Alright, so our friend Jimmy here for lunch decides he wants to eat some rice, some roasted chickpeas with a nice avocado. Looks so delicious. But let's take a look. Let's take a closer look as to what he's actually putting in his body. Right. So with the rice, he's getting his carb intake. With the chickpeas, he's getting his proteins, and with the avocado, he's getting his fat intake. So let's take a look at our proteins first. Right. So our proteins, he's eating his proteins through the chickpeas. So the proteins are entering the body through the mouth. They're getting broken down by the teeth. They're getting grinded down, but there's no actual real breakdown happening in here. No chemical digestion, just the mechanical digestion, breaking the proteins into smaller pieces. But the proteins will then form into a bolus, travel down into the esophagus, into the stomach. This is where the stomach releases pepsin. And this is where the first step of protein breakdown really happens. So the proteins get attacked by the pepsin, and the pepsin starts breaking down the proteins, and they will then become peptides. Now the peptides are now being broken down by the stomach. They're traveling through into the duodenum. This is where the pancreas is now releasing trypsin. Trypsin is another amino acid, another enzyme that breaks down your peptides into their final form, amino acids. From here, the amino acids will travel through the rest of the small intestine where absorption will occur. Now we'll talk about what's actually happening with the absorption later. But basically what's happening is all your nutrients are being absorbed into the villi, into the walls of the small intestine. And they're traveling into the large intestine where water is being absorbed and other non-digestible materials are being absorbed. And eventually it will be stored in the rectum and released to the anus when it's ready to be released. So that's with proteins. Now let's look at our carbs. So our carb intake here is going to be our rice. Rice is a very good source of carbohydrates. Very common in a vegan's diet. Right, so our carbohydrates are going to start in the mouth. However, different from proteins, your carbs will be chemically digested in the mouth. So what happens is there's an amylase, a salivary amylase that is released in the mouth, which breaks down your starch into a smaller form called maltose. Now maltose, along with the mechanical digestion of the teeth, the grinding down of the teeth, the food, it'll then become maltose and travel through the esophagus into the stomach. The rugae, the folds in the stomach, are going to break it down into smaller pieces. However, it does not reach its final form until again it reaches the duodenum, where it's attacked by things like lipase, sucrase. All these enzymes will look to break down maltose into its final form, glucose. Now once glucose is here, it gets broken down, it travels through the small intestine. Again, its nutrients get absorbed. We'll talk about that later once we're finished with everything. But all these nutrients are getting absorbed. It follows the same path. It goes into the large intestine where the H2O, the water, gets drawn out, and then it will be stored in the rectum, released to the anus when it's ready. Now the final point, avocado. He's consuming avocado. Avocados are a great source of healthy fats. So what happens, he's consuming the fats. The fats get mechanically broken down by the mouth, by the teeth. And then they continue down to the esophagus, the stomach, the folds, and the rugae. They'll start breaking them down. And then that's when it enters the small intestine, and then the liver will release bile that is stored in the gallbladder, and then this bile is going to attack the fats into its smallest form, fatty acids. And that's when it'll continue into the small intestine. Nutrients will get absorbed, and then it'll go through the large intestine just like the other ones, where water will get absorbed from it. It'll be stored in the rectum, released to the anus. Now, all the food molecules that he's eating, so his carbs, his proteins, and his fats, they all have vitamins in them. Like your avocados is very high in vitamins A and K, and then so all these vitamins, the absorption mostly happens in the jejunum and the ileum of the small intestine. So if we look at our vitamins, let's say we're looking at, there's two different types of vitamins. There's our fat soluble and our water soluble. So our fat solubles are like vitamins A, K, D, and E, I believe. And so these vitamins are fat soluble. So what happens is, in our previous video, we talked about how fats travel through the lymph system and not the circulatory system. So that's what's happening here. The fat soluble minerals are being absorbed through the lymph system, so your body, it can be distributed to the body where it needs it the most. And then there's also water soluble vitamins, which is like vitamin C and your B+, so like either B2, B3, B6. those as well as your minerals. So we're talking about iron, we're talking about magnesium, potassium, calcium, all those minerals. Those are being absorbed through the circulatory system, through your blood. They're traveling through your blood. And as for what vitamins and minerals are, they're basically essential nutrients in your body that are needed to keep your body healthy. So they're used for healing, for growing, anything that your body needs to survive. Vitamins and minerals are a big help in that. So yeah, that's what he ate for lunch, and we'll move on to dinner now.